Life on Key Biscayne is defined by a specific kind of privilege. For 16-year-old honor student Nick Andreas, this sun-drenched Florida coast was the backdrop for a seemingly perfect American upbringing. Nick carefully maintained his external image, anchoring his identity to material markers like his prized 1969 Mustang Mach 1. But that curated image shattered the moment Nick walked into the Miami-Dade courthouse. He wasn't there for a school event, but to stand before a judge for physically assaulting his girlfriend. Even with a restraining order in his hand, Nick felt no remorse. He viewed himself as the true victim, persecuted by a vindictive partner and a biased legal system. This disconnect between Nick's outward success and his internal volatility raises a central question. Why does an adolescent with every advantage resort to violence? And how did he learn to justify it? A court-mandated journal provides the first look into the mechanics of Nick's behavior. By tracing the relationship from the beginning, the writing reveals that the physical assault was actually the final step in a long, calculated pattern of control. The cycle began with isolation. Nick severed Caitlin's connection to her best friend, narrowing her world until he was its only occupant. This evolved into absolute dominance, like throwing her necklace from a moving car to enforce his aesthetic will over her autonomy. These psychological microaggressions built the foundation for the eventual assault. Physical violence was simply the ultimate tool Nick used to maintain the hierarchy he had already established. In a family violence class, Nick was forced to look past his immediate excuses. The curriculum stripped away his focus on external stressors to examine the history of his own household. The class met in a room overlooking the metro rail tracks, where men from every socioeconomic background were forced to confront the behaviors they shared. Nick's father was a successful investment banker, but the domestic reality was far from the professional facade. He was a tyrant who maintained order through regular beatings and psychological degradation. The violence at home was volatile and unpredictable. Nick lived in constant hypervigilance, once receiving a brutal midnight beating over a missing case of beer. Nick was experiencing psychological transfer, a process where trauma and powerlessness from one relationship are redirected onto a new target. This created a psychological deficit that he tried to balance by dominating Caitlin. The assault on Caitlin was a learned survival mechanism, a desperate attempt to reclaim the power that was stripped from him every night by his father. The lethal stakes of this generational cycle are visible in the story of Leo, another member of the class. Leo's abusive stepfather weaponized family loyalty, forcing Leo to physically assault his own twin brother. That systemic manipulation led to an irreversible conclusion. Leo's brother died by suicide. Internalized trauma creates a sensation described as breathing underwater. It is a state of constant, suffocating pressure, where a person eventually lashes out at someone else just to survive the feeling of drowning. Nick's curated cool kid identity was a way of holding his breath. The slap that landed him in court was a violent gasp for air. Stopping intimate partner violence requires looking past the final symptom. Breaking the cycle means shattering the mask of perfection and confronting the generational trauma that builds abusers in the first place.